I used to think love was something I could earn, that if I just gave enough, enough time, enough energy, enough of myself, people would finally love me the way I needed. So I poured myself out like an offering, measuring my worth in how much I could sacrifice. I became an expert at anticipating needs before they were spoken, at smoothing over tensions before they became conflicts, at shrinking my own desires so others would find me easy to love. But no matter how much I gave, it never felt like enough. I'd stay up late listening to someone else's problems while mine went unspoken. I'd swallow my hurt to keep the peace, nodding along when I wanted to scream. I molded myself into whatever shape I thought would make me worthy of love, only to realize, too late, that I had disappeared into the role. The cruelest part? The more I gave, the deeper the ache grew when that love wasn't returned in the same way. I'd watch others receive effortlessly what I had to fight for, and the resentment would coil tight in my chest. Why am I always the one loving harder? Why is my too much still not enough? The cycle was exhausting. Give until I'm empty, blame myself when it's not reciprocated, then give even more, hoping this time might be different. It took years to understand. Love wasn't a transaction. No amount of self-abandonment could guarantee I'd be loved in return. The real work wasn't in becoming someone else's idea of enough. It was in learning to see myself as whole, even when I wasn't giving anything at all. Where anxious attachment comes from. Anxious attachment doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's something etched into us, often before we even have words to understand it. Picture a child waiting by the window, unsure if today will bring warmth or withdrawal from the person they depend on most. One day, they're scooped up in a hug. The next, met with silence or irritation for needing too much. That whiplash teaches a devastating lesson. Love is unstable. Safety is conditional. These aren't just emotional wounds. They're neurological blueprints. When care is unpredictable, a child's developing brain adapts by staying in a constant state of alertness. They become tiny detectives, scanning tones and facial expressions for clues about when the next emotional withdrawal might come. Pleasing becomes survival. Hypervigilance becomes second nature. The tragedy? They often mistake this exhausting dance for love itself. By adulthood, the pattern feels like truth. If I'm perfect, they'll stay. If I need nothing, I'll be loved. Relationships become a high-stakes performance where forgetting your lines, having a bad day, expressing a need, might mean the curtain falls for good. The cruel irony? The very adaptations that helped survive childhood, the appeasing, the overgiving, often repel the secure, consistent love they crave most. The fear isn't irrational. It's the echo of a nervous system trained in scarcity. But here's what that child couldn't know. The problem was never their too much. It was the world's too little. I can still feel the weight of those childhood moments. The way I'd hold my breath when my father came home, trying to read his mood from the sound of his footsteps. Some days he'd sweep me up in bear hugs, his laughter filling the house with warmth. Other days, his silence felt heavier than winter coats, his attention slipping through my fingers no matter how quietly I tiptoed around him. I learned to navigate these shifting tides by becoming what I thought he needed, the perfect, low-maintenance child who never made waves. I collected gold stars and perfect grades like armor, believing if I could just be good enough, helpful enough, undemanding enough, maybe this time the love would stick. This survival strategy followed me like a shadow into adulthood, twisting my relationships into painful echoes of those childhood dynamics. I found myself drawn to partners whose affection came in unpredictable bursts, their intermittent attention feeling strangely like home. I'd bend myself into impossible shapes to please them, canceling plans last minute when they were too tired, swallowing my hurt when they forgot important dates, pretending I didn't notice when their eyes wandered during conversations. The sick familiarity of this dance kept me trapped in a cycle where I was always overgiving while secretly starving, mistaking crumbs for feasts because at least crumbs were something. What I couldn't see then was how I'd internalized that childhood belief. that love had to be earned through constant emotional labor. Every new relationship became another chance to finally get it right, to prove I was worthy of the consistent love I'd never received. The heartbreaking truth slowly dawned on me. No amount of adult perfection could heal those childhood wounds. The real work wasn't about becoming more lovable. It was about learning to recognize when love wasn't being offered in the way I deserved. Now, when I feel that old panic rising, that desperate urge to perform, to fix, to prove my worth, I pause. I remind myself that secure love doesn't require contortion. The people who are truly meant to love me won't make me audition for the role every single day. For those with anxious attachment, peace feels like the quiet before the storm. When a partner is consistently attentive or a relationship feels stable, an internal alarm starts blaring. This isn't the emotional terrain they're accustomed to navigating. Their body tenses during lazy Sunday mornings in bed. Their mind races through happy texts looking for hidden meanings. They scrutinize affectionate gestures for signs of ulterior motives. It's not that they don't want the love. It's that their nervous system has been conditioned to expect abandonment as surely as changing seasons. This hypervigilance manifests in subtle but destructive ways. Reading 3 days of perfect behavior as ominous rather than reassuring. Interpreting "I love you" as a prelude to loss rather than a declaration of commitment. The brain, trained on intermittent reinforcement, starts manufacturing threats where none exist. A slightly shorter phone call becomes proof of waning interest. A busy workday transforms into emotional withdrawal. The cruel irony? This constant scanning for danger often creates the very rejection they fear. Partners grow weary of having their love treated as suspicious, of being punished for consistency. What begins as self-protection becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The anxious partner's need for reassurance pushes the other away, which then confirms the original fear. Breaking this cycle requires the terrifying work of learning to tolerate happiness without waiting for the other shoe to drop, to rewire a brain that's learned to equate calm with impending catastrophe. For those with anxious attachment, people-pleasing isn't just a habit. It's an entire survival mechanism wired into their nervous system. Beneath every accommodating smile and cheerful "no problem" lies a quiet desperation. If I make myself easy enough to love, maybe you won't leave me. They become masters of emotional contortion, bending themselves into whatever shape seems most palatable to others while their authentic self shrinks in the shadows. You'll see it in the way they reflexively apologize for inconveniences that aren't their fault, how they laugh a beat too long at unfunny jokes, or how they immediately backtrack when their needs accidentally slip out. "Oh no, it's fine, really." This constant self-editing creates a haunting disconnect. In relationships, they present a carefully curated version of themselves, the low-maintenance, eternally understanding partner who never complains. But behind this facade, resentment builds like floodwaters against a dam. They watch bitterly as others comfortably assert boundaries while they themselves whisper "yes" through clenched teeth. The cruel irony is that the more they people-please, the less authentic connection they experience. Partners grow attached to this accommodating persona, leaving the real person feeling more unseen than ever. The breaking point comes when they realize they've become strangers to themselves, when they can't distinguish their own desires from what they think others want from them. Healing begins with small acts of rebellion, saying, "I actually don't like that restaurant," without softening it with a smile or admitting, "I'm not okay" when someone asks. Each honest expression feels terrifying, like stepping off a cliff. But it's in these raw, unpolished moments that true intimacy finally becomes possible. Because love shouldn't be something you audition for with perfect behavior. It should be a space where you're cherished for your messy, unfiltered, gloriously imperfect self. What often gets dismissed as clingy behavior is actually the desperate thrashing of someone trying to keep their head above emotional waters. For those with anxious attachment, every unanswered text or uninitiated conversation isn't just a minor oversight. It's potential evidence of impending abandonment, triggering a primal panic that demands immediate reassurance. This manifests in a compulsive need to maintain connection, double texting when replies are delayed, inventing reasons to check in, reading and rereading messages for hidden meanings. Each attempt to soothe the anxiety is like pouring gasoline on a fire. The more they seek validation, the needier they feel, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of escalating distress. The tragedy lies in how this survival strategy backfires spectacularly. Partners who initially provided comfort start feeling smothered, their patience wearing thin under the constant demand for reassurance. What began as expressions of love, "I just miss you," becomes sources of tension until the anxious partner's worst fear comes true. Their neediness pushes the other person away. This rejection then becomes proof that their anxieties were justified all along, reinforcing the belief that love is unstable and must be constantly monitored. Breaking free requires the terrifying work of learning to sit with uncertainty, to resist the compulsive urge to seek reassurance, and to discover that love can exist even in the quiet spaces between interactions. For those with anxious attachment, silence isn't just absence. It's an emotional void that quickly fills with worst-case scenarios. A text left on read for an hour can trigger a full-body panic, launching a cascade of catastrophic thoughts. They're tired of me. I said something wrong. They're going to leave. This isn't mere insecurity. It's the nervous system reacting to perceived danger, flooding the body with the same stress hormones that respond to physical threats. The logical mind knows better, but the emotional brain, conditioned by past abandonment, screams that connection lost is connection gone forever. The desperate attempts to regain equilibrium, sending follow-up messages, crafting the perfect text to elicit a response, checking their online status, only deepen the distress. Each unanswered message becomes another drop of acid in the wound of uncertainty. Ironically, the very behaviors meant to restore security often push partners further away, as the constant digital contact feels smothering rather than affectionate. This creates a vicious cycle where the anxious partner's need for reassurance grows in direct proportion to their partner's need for space. Healing begins when they learn to sit with the discomfort of silence, to recognize that pauses in communication aren't necessarily precursors to abandonment, and that real connection can withstand, and even benefit from, moments of quiet. For those with anxious attachment, reassurance can quickly transform from a natural relationship need into an addiction. Each hit of validation providing only temporary relief before the gnawing doubt returns with renewed intensity. What begins as simple check-ins, "Do you still love me?" escalates into compulsive questioning, where no amount of affirmation ever feels quite enough. The partner's loving words become like water through a sieve, immediately absorbed but never truly satiating the deeper hunger for security. This insatiable need stems from a fundamental distrust, not just of the relationship, but of one's own worthiness to be loved without conditions. As the cycle intensifies, a dangerous shift occurs. The anxious partner starts anticipating rejection so fiercely that they begin rejecting first. One day they're drowning their partner in affection. The next they're picking fights or withdrawing completely, subconsciously testing the limits of love while simultaneously pushing it away. This push-pull dynamic creates whiplash for both parties, transforming what could be a secure bond into an exhausting emotional roller coaster. The tragedy is that the very behaviors meant to prevent abandonment often become the cause of it, as partners grow weary of the constant emotional turbulence. Breaking free requires learning to self-soothe, to sit with uncertainty without demanding immediate reassurance, and to recognize that true security comes not from external validation, but from cultivating an inner sense of worthiness that no silence or space can shake. The journey towards secure attachment begins with the painful yet liberating moment when we stop blaming others for our relational wounds and start examining our own role in the patterns we keep repeating. For years, I found myself magnetically drawn to partners whose emotional unavailability felt strangely comfortable. Their hot and cold behavior perfectly matched my childhood blueprint of love. Secure relationships actually felt unsettling. The absence of drama left me waiting for the other shoe to drop, mistaking peace for impending abandonment. The breakthrough came when I realized I wasn't just attracted to unhealthy partners, I was reenacting old wounds, subconsciously trying to rewrite history by finally earning love from someone who couldn't give it. Healing required becoming the parent I never had, learning to sit with my own big emotions without fleeing or self-abandoning. I practiced speaking my needs aloud when no one was listening, building tolerance for the vulnerability I'd spent a lifetime avoiding. Slowly, I rewired my nervous system's definition of safety, teaching myself that consistency wasn't boredom and that healthy boundaries weren't rejection. This internal shift changed everything externally. As I grew more comfortable with emotional stability, I stopped being drawn to chaotic connections. The relationships I once would have dismissed as too boring became sanctuaries where I could finally exhale. True healing wasn't about finding someone to complete me. It was about becoming whole enough to recognize and choose partners who could meet me in that wholeness. For those with anxious attachment, conflict avoidance isn't about harmony. It's a survival strategy forged in the fires of conditional love. We become masters of swallowing our truths, convincing ourselves that if we just stay small and agreeable, we'll finally be loved without risk of abandonment. But this false peace comes at a devastating cost: the slow erosion of our authentic self. I remember how my stomach would churn during difficult conversations, my voice shrinking to a whisper as I prioritized keeping the peace over honoring my own needs. The irony was that in my desperate attempts to maintain connection through silence, I was actually preventing any chance of true intimacy from taking root. Real relationship depth isn't born from perfect agreement, but from the courageous moments when we risk discomfort to show up fully. It's in the trembling honesty of saying, "When you canceled our plans last minute, it made me feel unimportant," rather than reflexively answering, "It's fine," with a tight smile. These vulnerable expressions, when met with care and respect, become the building blocks of trust stronger than any conflict-free facade. The beautiful paradox is that by finally allowing ourselves to be fully seen, flaws and all, we create space for the secure connection we've always craved. What once felt like risking the relationship by speaking up becomes the very act that transforms it into something real and enduring. If today's conversation touched something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe so we can keep these honest conversations going. And if you have a story of your own, or need advice on something you're carrying in silence, drop it in the comments. I read every word, and who knows, your story might become the next video that helps someone feel a little less alone. This is Marriage Matters, and your voice matters here.